I can see how much people love me. Literally. When my lab partner asked to copy my homework and I refused, his number plummeted to 0 in a blink. The day I caught my boyfriend cheating, his stat took a nosedive off a cliff. The only number that ever truly terrified me was my mother's. I lived in constant dread of watching her percentage drop. Fortunately, for 18 years, the flashing neon digits above her head remained a steady, unwavering 100. She was the kind of mother who would sever ties with judgmental relatives just to shield me, who would bring home the absolute best of everything and lay it at my feet. Countless times, I whispered a silent prayer of gratitude for having the best mother in the world. Until 2 weeks ago. She came to visit me at school. I looked up, and a sharp, blinding glare pierced my eyes. 85. My chest tightened as if squeezed by an invisible fist. Panic set in. I spent the next fortnight in a manic spiral, picking apart every conversation, every grade, desperately searching for what I had done to disappoint her. Until today. Today, she brought home a girl. A girl in faded, oversized clothes, with large, trembling eyes. The biological daughter. Switched at birth 18 years ago in a chaotic county hospital. My mother held my hand so tightly my knuckles turned white. Tears streamed down her face as she swore to me, "Diana, don't be afraid. Even though she's back, you will always, always be my favorite girl." But the exact millisecond the word favorite left her lips, the digits above her head flickered violently, tumbling downward like a malfunctioning stock ticker. 20. Looking up at that bleeding, crimson number, a strange, quiet relief washed over me. It wasn't that I hadn't been good enough. It was simply that I didn't belong here anymore. I gently pulled my hand from my mother's grip. "Mom, I'm fine." The girl stood in the marble entryway, looking so fragile and raw it made my heart ache. Her name was Bella. 18 years ago, in a busy hospital ward, a tired nurse on shift change mixed up our ankle bands. Bella and I were sent home with the wrong families. My adoptive parents eventually struck gold in real estate, moving us into a sprawling estate in Westchester, while Bella stayed with my biological parents in a rundown Appalachian town, scraping by through 18 years of poverty. "Come in, Bella." "Come," my mother said, her voice dropping to a soft, reverent whisper, as if she were handling blown glass. "This is your home now." Bella stepped over the threshold. Her eyes darted from the 10-foot oil painting in the foyer to the dripping crystal chandelier, then down to the polished marble floors. Her fingers instinctively clawed at the frayed cuffs of her sweater. My mother noticed. She leaned down, closing her manicured hands over Bella's rough ones. "Don't be afraid, sweetheart. All of this, it's yours now." It was an exquisitely tender gesture. I stood frozen in the hallway, trying to remember the last time she had held my hand with that kind of desperate, protective warmth. I couldn't. After dinner, my mother led Bella upstairs. "Bella, I've put together a room for you. Let me know if there's anything else you need." She threw open the double doors of the south-facing guest suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a walk-in closet, a soaking tub. It was the crown jewel of our guest wing. Bella hovered at the threshold, shifting her weight. This is too big. I don't think I can sleep here. Just give me a small closet or something." Her voice was thick with genuine, overwhelming humility. My mother pulled her into a tight embrace. "You've suffered for 18 years, my sweet girl. I want to give you the world to make up for it." She guided Bella through the room, sweeping open the double doors of the closet. "Tomorrow, we're going to 5th Avenue. We'll get your measurements taken, and we'll have your wardrobe custom-tailored every season." Bella didn't say a word. She bit her lower lip, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. That was all it took to break my mother. She pulled Bella to her chest, her own voice cracking with a maternal agony. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry I let you suffer out there for so long." Bella buried her face in my mother's shoulder, her frame trembling with quiet sobs. I leaned against the doorframe, watching the tableau play out. Above my mother's head, the red numbers flickered again. From 20, they ticked down to 17. I turned on my heel and walked back to my own room. Before bed, there was a soft knock on my door. "Diana," my mother murmured. She sat on the edge of my mattress, taking my hand in hers. "I know this is incredibly hard on you. But Bella, she's had such a brutal life. I have to make it right." She looked at me, her eyes still red and swollen. "You're the older sister here. Can you help me look after her? Please?" "Of course, Mom." When I said yes, the number above her head didn't budge. A cold, static 17. She let out a long sigh of relief, leaning down to press a soft kiss to my forehead. "My good, sensible Diana. I knew I could count on you." She stood up and left. Her soft footsteps padded down the hallway, but instead of turning toward the master wing, they veered off, slipping into Bella's room. Through the thin drywall, her muffled voice carried over to me. "Bella, sweetheart? Are the blankets warm enough? Do you want me to stay with you tonight?" I stared blankly at the ceiling. Quietly, without my permission, tears began to track down my temples. A week after Bella arrived, my mother enrolled her in my school. Oak Ridge Prep was the most prestigious private academy in the state, boasting a tuition of $40,000 a year, populated entirely by the heirs of old money and political dynasties. The rumors had spread faster than wildfire. When I walked into homeroom on Monday morning, every eye in the room locked onto me like heat-seeking missiles. The first one to say something to my face was Brittany. She sat directly behind me. Her father was a ruthless real estate mogul, and she had inherited his sharp, cutting tongue. Well. If it isn't Diana Westbrook, Brittany drawled, propping her designer boots onto her desk. So, word on the street is you're a counterfeit. I heard the real Westbrook daughter actually has some decent genes. I ignored her, unpacking my binder. Oh, come on, don't be like that, she whispered, leaning over my shoulder, her perfume cloying and suffocating. What does that make you now? A squatter? You've been sitting in her throne for 18 years. Don't you think it's time to pay rent? Mind your own business, Brittany. Just making conversation. She smirked, leaning back in her chair. It's just that your social stock just took a major hit. We all need to know where we stand with you now, right? I gripped my pen so hard the plastic groaned under my knuckles. Between periods, the whispers in the hallway were intentionally, performatively loud. Did you hear? Her biological parents are literally blue-collar townies in West Virginia. So those Chanel bags and Saint Laurent boots she wore last semester, she bought all of that with someone else's trust fund? Ugh. If I were her, I'd have crawled into a hole and died of embarrassment by now. I quickened my pace, keeping my gaze fixed on the floor, pretending the words weren't tearing through me. But the real blow didn't come from the bullies. It came when I realized my best friend had already jumped ship. Her name was Lauren. We had been inseparable since 6th grade. 7 years of sleepovers, shared secrets, and late-night panic attacks. On Wednesday, I went to find her at lunch. From across the cafeteria, I spotted her sitting at our usual table by the window. Sitting across from her was Bella. They were laughing. Lauren's smile faltered for a fraction of a second when she saw me approaching. Diana. Hey. Come sit down. I slipped into the booth beside her. Bella offered me a soft, timid smile. Hi, Diana. Lauren pushed her plate of chicken tenders toward Bella. Eat up, Bella. You're practically skeletal. We need to fatten you up. She turned to me, her expression a mix of guilt and forced cheerfulness. Bella doesn't really know anyone yet. I figured I'd show her around, help her get adjusted. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Sure. Throughout lunch, Lauren kept her focus entirely on Bella, asking about her life in West Virginia, her favorite music, whether she wanted to go to the mall this weekend. Bella answered every question with a quiet, fragile gratitude. You're so nice to me, Lauren. I've never been to a place like this. I feel so out of my depth. Lauren beamed, practically glowing with the satisfaction of being a savior. She threw an arm around Bella's shoulder. Hey, don't worry about it. If anyone gives you trouble, you come straight to me. I've got your back. I sat beside them, chewing on dry food that tasted like cardboard. By the time the bell rang, Lauren hadn't directed more than 3 sentences to me. That afternoon, I texted her, hey, still down for the gallery opening this Saturday? Her reply came back almost instantly. Actually, I promised Bella I'd take her shopping this weekend. Next time. She had never canceled on me before. Never. On Friday, I stood by the school gates, waiting for our family driver. Bella came jogging up behind me, breathless, her cheeks flushed pink. She reached out and lightly caught my sleeve. Diana, wait. Lauren is taking me to get a new phone tomorrow. Can you please come with us? Her face was a mask of sweet, earnest pleading. But as she let go of my arm, I caught the tiniest, almost imperceptible twitch at the corner of her lips. A flicker of triumph. I kept my voice flat. I have plans. Oh. Okay, she said softly. She didn't press. Instead, she spun around and skipped back toward Lauren, who was waiting near the parking lot. They linked arms and walked away. I climbed into the back of the town car and closed my eyes. I could feel my life, my relationships, slipping through my fingers like dry sand. No matter how hard I clenched my fists, I couldn't hold on to any of it. On Monday, I finally received the recommendation letter I had been dreaming of. My gut instinct, a relic of 18 years of habit, was to share the joy with my mother. I had been preparing my application for Oxford University since my sophomore year. I had taken the SATs twice, completed 2 research programs with Columbia professors, and won awards in 4 national academic competitions. And now, I had the golden ticket, a personal recommendation letter written by the headmaster himself. Only 1 student per graduating class received it. When I got home that evening, the excitement was practically vibrating under my skin. But when I walked into the living room, my mother was already waiting for me. The sealed envelope containing my letter was resting on the marble coffee table. Diana, sit down. I need to talk to you about something, she said, her expression tight and conflicted. Bella's education in West Virginia was lacking, to say the least. She doesn't have the grades to get into a top-tier state school here. I want to send her abroad, but she has no extracurriculars, no research papers, nothing. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. Diana, can you let Bella have this recommendation letter? I stared at her, convinced I had misheard. Mom, I've spent 2 years building my portfolio for this. I know, she said, catching my hands. But you're brilliant, Diana. Your SAT scores are perfect. You could get into any Ivy League school on your own merit. Bella isn't like you. Without this letter, she has no shot at a future. This is my dream, Mom. I earned this. Diana, please. It's not that I don't care about your hard work. Then don't ask me to give it away, I snapped. It was the first time in my life I had ever spoken back to her. My mother's expression instantly hardened. The warmth vanished from her eyes, replaced by a cold, sharp distance. Diana Westbrook, she said, her voice dropping an octave. Even if you keep that letter, who do you think is paying your tuition? $50,000 a year. Do you have that kind of cash lying around? I froze. My throat closed up. Every single thing you've eaten, worn, and used for 18 years was paid for by our money. Bella is my biological child. She suffered in poverty while you lived in luxury. If I want to give her a chance at a real education, is that really so terrible of me? The look she gave me was stripped of all maternal warmth. It was the gaze of a creditor collecting a debt. If you feel so hard done by, then fund your own life. I stood there, the blood draining from my face. My whole body went numb. Fine, I said, my voice barely a whisper. If you think you're so independent, then don't touch a single dime of our money, she said, standing up and pointing a perfectly manicured finger toward the foyer. Get out. Don't come back until you're ready to apologize. I looked up. The number above her head had dropped to a sickening, bleeding 6. I swallowed the tears threatening to spill, grabbed my backpack, and walked out into the cold night. I spent that night huddled on a bench in a public park, shivering. The next afternoon, a text came through from my mother. Diana, I was too harsh yesterday. Come home. Bella's welcome home party is tonight, and I want you there. We're a family, we can work this out. My resolve crumbled. I told myself she was still my mother, that 18 years of love couldn't just vanish. I went back. The party was an extravagant affair at a luxury hotel, with over 200 guests from Westchester's elite. Bella stood on the elevated stage, draped in a custom-designed silk gown, bathed in a warm spotlight. My mother held her hand, raising it slightly as she addressed the crowd. This is my biological daughter, Bella. Today, she is finally home. The room erupted into thunderous applause. I stood in the dim shadow of the back corner, wearing a simple black dress I'd hastily pulled from my closet. Up on stage, my mother was practically glowing with pride, her arm wrapped tightly around Bella's shoulders. The number floating above her head was 5. Halfway through the evening, I went to the restroom to escape the noise. But as I pushed the heavy door open, I froze. Resting on the marble vanity was a delicate diamond necklace. It was a Tiffany pendant, the very one my mother had given me for my 17th birthday. I knew I had left it in my jewelry box at home this morning. How was it here? Suddenly, a sharp gasp sounded behind me. Oh my God. Bella stood in the doorway, flanked by 3 of our mother's wealthy friends. Her eyes were wide, staring at the vanity. Diana, that's the necklace Mom gave me as a welcome gift. Why do you have it? What? I left it in the powder room earlier, and when I went back, it was gone. I've been looking everywhere for it. Bella's eyes welled with tears, her voice trembling. Diana, did you take it by mistake? She didn't use the word stole. But she didn't have to. The silent accusations from the women standing behind her were loud enough. I didn't touch your necklace, I said, my voice hardening. This is my... What's going on in here? My mother's voice cut through the tension. She walked in, her gaze darting from the diamond pendant to Bella's tear-stained face. Diana, why do you have Bella's necklace? This isn't her necklace, Mom. This is the one you gave me last year. Don't lie to me, my mother snapped, her brow furrowing deep. I bought this piece last week specifically for Bella. She snatched the necklace off the counter and flipped the pendant. Engraved on the back was a small, delicate letter, B. Not my initials. Bella's. It wasn't mine. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Bella whispered, maybe Diana just got confused, it's okay. Please don't be mad at her. The more gracious Bella tried to appear, the sharper the glares from the onlookers became. My mother handed the necklace back to Bella, then turned her full attention to me. There was no rage in her eyes. Instead, there was something far worse, something that suffocated me from the inside out, utter disappointment. Diana, is it really so impossible for you to share this life with her? She asked, her voice quiet but heavy. I am so incredibly disappointed in you. Above her head, the digital display flickered violently, crashing from 6, straight down to 1. I stared at that 1. A cold, hysterical laugh escaped my lips. I spun around and walked out of the restroom, and then out of the hotel. When I reached the lobby, I stopped and looked back one last time. The heavy oak doors of the ballroom were shut, but the muffled swell of classical music and polite laughter leaked through. Bella was in there, basking in the light and the blessings of my former life. And I was out here in the dark. No longer a Westbrook. That night, I packed a single suitcase of my own belongings. I spent the night at a cheap motel near the highway, and the next morning, I bought a one-way bus ticket to West Virginia. It was a grueling 6-hour ride. The highway eventually gave way to winding mountain roads, the lush pine trees of the Appalachians closing in around us. My phone signal steadily dropped from 4 bars to 1, before blinking out entirely. The bus sputtered to a halt in a fading, dusty mining town. I paid a local guy $20 to take me the rest of the way on the back of his pickup truck. When we pulled up to the edge of the dirt road, I saw a middle-aged woman standing by a rusty mailbox. Her skin was deeply tanned and weathered from years of outdoor work, her hands rough and red. She was wearing a bright red winter coat that was clearly brand new. The paper price tag was still dangling from her sleeve. She was clutching a wrinkled school portrait, my photo. She kept looking up from the paper, frantically scanning the road. The moment our truck stopped and I climbed down, she froze. The photograph slipped from her fingers, fluttering into the dirt. "Diana?" She breathed, her voice cracking. I looked up at her head. Above her weathered hair, a soft, warm green number hovered. 83. We had never met. Not once in 18 years. Yet her love for me was already at 83%. "Mom," I said. The word felt heavy and foreign on my tongue. Martha Greer's tears spilled instantly. She lunged forward, throwing her arms around me and pulling me against her chest. There was no expensive French perfume. No soft cashmere. She smelled of cheap laundry detergent, wood smoke, and sweat. My baby is home," she sobbed, her entire body shaking. Her calloused hands cupped the back of my head, holding me so tightly as if she feared I might evaporate if she let go. Their house was a small, wood plank cottage with a tin roof, but inside, it was meticulously clean. On the worn wooden kitchen table, 6 steaming dishes were carefully laid out. A quiet, broad-shouldered man walked out of the kitchen carrying the final platter. His hands were thick with calluses, coal dust permanently embedded under his fingernails. When he saw me, his hands trembled, and he nearly dropped the dish. He set it down quickly, then wiped his palms on his stained apron over and over again. "Eat," he muttered, his voice incredibly raspy. Just that one word. I glanced up. Above his head. 85. Martha pulled me down onto a wooden chair, immediately piling food onto my plate. "We didn't know what you liked," she said, her eyes shining. "I made your dad buy everything we could find at the market. Try the trout, he caught it fresh from the creek this morning." I took a bite of the fish. It was full of small bones, but it was incredibly sweet and fresh. "It's delicious," I whispered. Martha beamed, quickly standing up to ladle some soup for me. I lowered my head, and a hot tear slipped quietly into my bowl. That afternoon, Martha insisted on walking me down the town's single main road. To every neighbor we passed, she proudly declared, "This is my daughter. My real girl." Her smile was deep, carving lines into her face, far more radiant than my adoptive mother's polished smile at the gala. Her number ticked up to 89. Still rising. At dusk, she boiled a large pot of water on the stove and poured it into a plastic tub for me to soak my feet. "The mountain air gets cold at night," she said softly. "Keep your feet warm so you don't catch a chill." I slipped my feet into the warm water, feeling the heat rise through my bones. At that moment, my phone buzzed. A single bar of signal had finally found its way through the valley. A deluge of notifications flooded my screen. 34 missed calls from Catherine Westbrook. And right before my eyes, the number representing her love began to fluctuate wildly. 19. 67. 82, still climbing. I sat on the edge of the creaking iron bed in my new room, staring at the glowing screen of my cheap, cracked phone. 19. 67. 82. The digits above Catherine Westbrook's ghosted caller ID spun like a broken slot machine. For 18 years, I had believed that her love was an absolute constant, a granite foundation upon which my entire identity was built. But staring at those frantic, jumping numbers in the dim light of a West Virginia evening, the horror of the truth finally crystallized in my mind. Catherine's love wasn't a reservoir. It was an algorithm. When I was the perfect, obedient, high-achieving prodigy who brought honor to the Westbrook name, her metric was 100%. When Bella arrived, frail, tragic, and carrying the biological bloodline Catherine had unknowingly craved, I became an inconvenient reminder of a mistake, and my value crashed to 1%. So why was it shooting back up to 82% now? Because I had done the one thing Catherine Westbrook's pristine vanity could not endure. I had walked away. I had refused to play the martyr in her gilded theater. By leaving, by sleeping on a park bench and taking a 6-hour bus into the dark heart of Appalachia, I had torn the script to shreds. If the socialites of Westchester found out that the girl they had raised for 18 years had been cast out into absolute poverty overnight, the rumors would devour her. Her love hadn't returned. What I was seeing was a lethal Cocktail of panic, wounded pride, and a desperate, frantic need to regain control. The phone buzzed in my hand again. Her name flashed across the screen for the 35th time. I slid my thumb across the glass and brought the phone to my ear. I didn't say a word. Diana? Catherine's voice exploded through the speaker, sharp, breathless, and laced with an edge of hysteria I had never heard in her 18 years of perfectly modulated high society speech. Where are you? Do you have any idea what you've done? Your father, she caught herself, her voice pitching higher. Richard had to call the private security firm. We thought you were kidnapped. Where are you? I listened to the sound of her frantic breathing. Above the phone, in my mind's eye, I could feel the digit vibrating at 85. I'm at home, Catherine, I said quietly. The silence on the other end was deafening. What did you just call me? She whispered, the shock radiating through the cellular signal. I called you Catherine, I replied, my voice steady, stripped of all the desperate deference I had spent a lifetime cultivating. You told me 2 days ago that every bite of food I ate was paid for by your family, and that if I felt wronged, I should fund my own life. You threw me out. I am simply following your instructions. I was angry. Catherine snapped, her tone shifting instantly from panicky concern to rigid authority. You stole your sister's necklace. I didn't steal anything, and you know it, I interrupted coldly. You checked the initials because you wanted me to be guilty. It was easier to make me a villain than to admit that you were replacing me. But it doesn't matter anymore. You have your biological daughter now. You have the girl who shares your blood. Leave me alone. Diana, stop this childish melodrama this instant. Her voice crackled with fury. You are an 18-year-old girl with no money, no connections, and no future without us. Do you think you can survive in some backwoods coal town? You'll be begging to come back in a week. I am sending a car to pick you up tomorrow morning. You will come home, you will apologize to Bella, and we will put an end to this embarrassing spectacle. As she made her demands, the invisible number above her header plummeted like a stone dropped into a well. 85. 50. 22. 4. Control. That was all it ever was. The moment I asserted my own autonomy, her love evaporated into thin air. Don't send a car, I said softly. If anyone from Westchester comes here, I will call the local sheriff and report them for harassment. Goodbye, Mrs. Westbrook. Diana. Don't you dare hang up on. I pressed the red button, ending the call. Then, without a second thought, I pulled up her contact card, tapped block, and did the same for Richard, Lauren, and every single contact associated with Oak Ridge Prep. I set the phone down on the small wooden nightstand. Outside my window, the wind howled through the Appalachian pines, carrying the cold, crisp scent of fallen leaves and damp earth. From the kitchen downstairs, I could hear the soft, rhythmic clinking of dishes. Martha was washing the dinner plates by hand, while Frank quietly hummed a low, gravelly country tune as he chopped firewood on the back porch. I pulled my knees up to my chest and buried my face in my arms. For the first time in 18 years, the space above my head felt clear. The silence was deafening, but for the first time in my life, it was real. The transition from the manicured, marble-paved solitude of Westchester to the rugged, close-knit survival of Coal Creek, West Virginia, was not a transition, it was a violent reshaping of reality. The Greer cottage had 3 rooms. The heating came from a cast-iron wood stove that roared in the center of the living room, and the water was heated on the stove if you wanted a bath that didn't freeze your bones. On my 3rd morning, I woke up at 5 o'clock. The air in my bedroom was so cold I could see my own breath hovering in small, ghostly clouds. When I stepped downstairs, I found Frank sitting at the wooden table in his faded blue work overalls, a heavy metal lunchbox sitting beside a thermos of black coffee. Above his head, the soft, warm green digits read, 88. He looked up as I entered, his rough, coal-stained fingers tightening around his mug. He looked flustered, as if he felt guilty for existing in his own kitchen while I was awake. Morning, Diana, he rasped, quickly rising to his feet. I tried to keep quiet. Didn't mean to wake you. You didn't wake me, Dad, I said. The word Dad slipped out naturally, but the effect on Frank was instantaneous. His tall, slightly stooped frame went entirely rigid. He stared at me, his wide, dark eyes glistening with a sudden, overwhelming moisture. Above his head, the green numbers flickered violently, surging upward, 88. 94. 97. He swallowed hard, turning his face away toward the window to hide the tear that tracked through the smudge of soot on his cheek. Breakfast is on the stove, he muttered, his voice thick. Your mom made biscuits before she left for her shift. At the diner. Let me pack your lunch, I said, stepping up to the counter. Oh, no, sweetie, you don't gotta do that, Frank said hurriedly, waving his hands. That's dirty work, packing for the mines. You're a lady. You were raised proper. I looked at him, at the worn fabric of his jacket, at the deep, permanent lines carved into his forehead from 40 years of backbreaking labor under the earth. I was raised in a golden cage, Dad, I said quietly, picking up the foil wrapper and wrapping his fried egg sandwich with meticulous care. I'd rather be here. He watched me in silence. When I handed him his lunchbox, he took it with both hands, cradling it as if it were made of solid gold. Thank you, daughter, he whispered. That morning, after Frank left for the pit, I sat down at the kitchen table with my old, second-hand laptop. I didn't have the luxury of wallowing in self-pity. Catherine had been right about one thing, I had no money. The $34 in my wallet was all I possessed in the world. If I wanted to go to Oxford, if I wanted to secure a future that no one could ever strip away from me, I had to build it from the ground up, with my own hands. The application deadline for independent international applicants for Oxford's Department of Materials Science and Engineering was 4 weeks away. But without Oak Ridge Prep's institutional endorsement, without a headmaster's recommendation, and without $50,000 for tuition, my odds were practically non-existent. Unless I won the International Rhodes Sloan Academic Fellowship. The Rhodes Sloan was a legendary, ultra-competitive grant awarded to only 3 high school seniors in North America each year. It provided a full, unrestricted 4-year ride to any global university, along with a $50,000 research stipend. But to qualify, an applicant had to submit an original, fully realized empirical research paper in the field of applied sciences, along with a live defense before a panel of elite scholars in Washington, D.C. I opened a blank document. For 2 years at Oak Ridge Prep, I had been working on a theoretical concept, the structural optimization of carbon nanotube reinforced composite alloys for extreme subsurface environments. It was a project I had originally conceptualized for my Columbia research program, the very project Catherine had tried to steal from me to give to Bella. They had my old draft locked in my room in Westchester. But they didn't have my mind. I looked out the window at the towering, dark mountains surrounding the valley. Coal Creek was a town built on structural engineering, on the violent intersection of rock, pressure, and human labor. I didn't need Columbia's million-dollar laboratories. I had the real world right outside my door. Over the next 3 weeks, Coal Creek became my laboratory. Every morning, after helping Martha at the diner or cleaning the house, I walked down to the abandoned mining yards at the edge of town. I collected samples of rusted structural steel, degraded carbon composites, and shale rock. The town's retired chief mechanic, a gruff old man named Mr. Henderson, let me use his dusty garage workshop. Armed with an old hydraulic press, a blowtorch, and his rusted mechanical calipers, I spent 14 hours a day testing the tensile strength of local coal ash composite matrices. My hands, once manicured and soft, grew calloused. My palm developed a permanent grease stain near the thumb. But every evening when I walked home, smelling of iron dust and cold rain, Martha would be standing on the porch, waiting for me, with a thick wool blanket and a steaming mug of apple cider. Her number never dropped below 95. Frank's remained a solid, unwavering 98. For the first time in my life, I realized what real love felt like. It wasn't a score you had to maintain by pleasing someone, it was an unshakable floor beneath your feet, holding you up no matter how filthy, tired, or broken you were. While I was digging through iron scrap in the West Virginia rain, the pristine facade of Westchester was beginning to fracture. I learned about it through Lauren, or rather, through the frantic, unread emails that Lauren began sending to my old, semi-abandoned student inbox. At first, the emails were filled with defensive anger. Subject: why are you being like this? Diana, blocking my number is totally uncalled for. I was just trying to be nice to Bella because she had a hard life. You didn't have to throw a tantrum and run away. A week later, the tone shifted. Subject: please answer me. Diana, things are really weird here. Bella brought your old calculus notebook to class, but when Mr. Harrison asked her to solve the differential equation on the board, she couldn't even start it. She burst into tears and said you used to bully her and give her fake notes. But I saw her writing. It wasn't your handwriting. Diana, is everything okay? By the 3rd week, the emails were bordering on panic. Subject: I'm so sorry. Diana, please. Diana, I'm so sorry. I was an idiot. Mrs. Westbrook came to school today. She had a huge fight with Headmaster Vance in his office. She was trying to force him to give your Oxford recommendation letter to Bella. But Headmaster Vance refused. He said Bella failed 3 midterm exams and that her application essay was blatantly plagiarized from an online blog. Mrs. Westbrook was screaming at him. And Diana. Brittany found out about the necklace. Bella tried to wear it to the autumn gala, but Brittany's older sister works at the Tiffany and Company in Manhattan. She checked the registry. Mrs. Westbrook bought that custom bee-engraved necklace 3 days after you supposedly stole it. Bella framed you. Everyone knows now. Lauren. I miss you so much. Please call me. I read the email sitting on the porch of the Greer cottage, the cold mountain wind whipping my hair across my face. I didn't reply. I simply closed the laptop, my heart entirely numb. Bella had wanted my life. She had craved the silk dresses, the crystal chandeliers, the social prestige, and the Oxford recommendation. But she had failed to realize one fundamental truth: my life was not built on silk and crystal. It was built on relentless, exhausting discipline. I had spent 18 years studying until 2 in the morning, mastering 3 languages, maintaining a flawless 4.0 GPA, and executing high-level scientific research. You could steal a girl's bedroom, her clothes, and her mother's favor, but you could not steal her intellect. Without me to act as the golden trophy, the Westbrook household was imploding under the weight of its own lies. Bella was not a prodigy, she was an insecure, undereducated girl who had spent 18 years in survival mode, and when thrust into the hyper-competitive pressure cooker of Westchester high society, she defaulted to manipulation and deceit. And Catherine, obsessed with perfection, was realizing that the daughter she had traded me for was ruining her precious reputation. 2 days before the road Sloan DC defense, a sleek, black Lincoln Town car with New York license plates pulled slowly down the dirt road of Coal Creek. The engine of the luxury sedan hummed quietly against the rustic backdrop of the Appalachian Valley. The driver, clad in a crisp suit, stepped out and opened the rear door. Catherine Westbrook stepped onto the gravel. She looked immaculate, as always, wrapped in a cream-colored Max Mara cashmere coat, her hair styled in a flawless chignon. But as she stepped toward the Greer cottage, her pristine Italian leather boots sank 2 inches into the thick, dark mud. She winced, her eyes sweeping over the peeling paint of the porch, the tin roof, and the rusted pickup truck parked in the driveway with an expression of profound disgust. Then, her eyes landed on me. I was sitting on the top step of the porch, wearing a thick flannel shirt, dark denim, and work boots covered in dry clay. I was holding a cup of black coffee, watching her with cool, unblinking detachment. Hovering above Catherine's head was a blinding, violently flickering neon number, 91. 91%. Higher than it had been since the day Bella arrived. I almost laughed out loud. It was so transparent, so pathetically obvious. She didn't love me because she missed me. She loved me because the past 3 weeks without me had been an absolute nightmare. She loved me because her social circle was mocking her, because Bella was failing school, and because her home had transformed from a temple of perfection into a battleground of humiliation. She needed her golden standard back to fix her life. Diana, Catherine said, her voice dripping with emotional strain as she stepped onto the porch, carefully avoiding the muddy patches. She reached out, her gloved hands trembling slightly as she tried to touch my face. My God, look at you. You're filthy. What have they done to you? I leaned back, dodging her touch effortlessly. They haven't done anything to me, Catherine. They fed me, gave me a home, and loved me without asking for a single thing in return. What are you doing here? Catherine's hand froze in midair. Her face twitched, but she quickly forced a soft, maternal smile, the same smile she used whenever reporters photographed us at charity galas. Diana, darling, this madness has gone on long enough, she said, her voice dropping into a desperate whisper. I know I was hard on you. I know I acted rashly. But I was overwhelmed. Bella was so traumatized, and I was trying so hard to make things right. I made a mistake, Diana. A terrible mistake. She took a step closer, looking into my eyes with what looked like genuine tears. Bella isn't like you, Catherine admitted, the resentment slipping into her tone before she caught herself. She doesn't have your grace. She doesn't have your mind. She has embarrassed us in front of the entire school board, and she lied to me about the necklace. I know the truth now. Diana. I know she set you up. I took a sip of my coffee, feeling the warm liquid slide down my throat. And I want you to come home. Catherine took my hands, holding them tightly. I've cleared everything up with Headmaster Vance. I told him it was all a misunderstanding. If you come back today, he will issue your Oxford recommendation letter immediately. I've bought you a new wardrobe. We can put all of this behind us. We will send Bella to a quiet boarding school in Switzerland, where she can get the specialized help she clearly needs. You will be my only girl again, Diana. Just like it used to be. She looked at me with eager, triumphant eyes, fully expecting me to weep with gratitude, to throw myself into her arms, and to climb into the back of her luxury car. Above her head, the green digits glowed brightly at 91. I looked at that number, and for the first time in my life, I felt no fear, no reverence, and no longing. I saw it for what it truly was, a bribe. A price tag. Attached to my freedom. No, I said quietly. Catherine blinked, as if I had spoken in a foreign language. What? I said no, I repeated, pulling my hands firmly from her grip. I am not coming back. Diana, don't be ridiculous. Her tone sharpened instantly, the maternal warmth evaporating like mist in the morning sun. You are turning down Oxford? You are turning down your inheritance, your future, your entire life, just to sit in the mud with these coal miners? These coal miners are my parents, I said, rising to my feet and standing tall. Looking down at her. They gave me a home when you threw me out for a crime I didn't commit. And as for Oxford, I don't need your recommendation letter, Catherine. And I certainly don't need your money. I reached into my pocket and pulled out an official parchment envelope bearing the silver embossed crest of the Rhodes Sloan Foundation. My paper on carbon nanotube composite alloys was selected as a national finalist, I said, holding it out so she could see the bold, black ink of my name. The final oral defense is tomorrow morning at the National Science Center in Washington, D.C. If I win, I get a full ride to Oxford, funded entirely on my own merit. I built this, Catherine. Without a single cent of Westbrook money. Catherine stared at the letter, her face draining of all color. The realization hit her like a physical blow. I didn't need her. I had never needed her status or her wealth. I had only needed her love, and now that I had realized how worthless her love was, she had zero leverage over me. Above her head, the numbers began to flicker violently, collapsing downward in a sickening, erratic cascade. 91. 60. 34. 12. 0. It hit 0. A dead, flatline gray, 0. The moment she realized I could no longer be used as a tool for her vanity, her affection ceased to exist entirely. You ungrateful little creature, Catherine hissed, her eyes narrowing into cold, razor-sharp slits of pure venom. After everything I gave you for 18 years? You think you can make it on your own? You think the world cares about a girl from a West Virginia dirt town? I made you, Diana. And I can destroy you. I looked at the gray, 0, hovering above her immaculate head, and a quiet, profound sense of peace washed over my entire soul. You didn't make me, Catherine, I said softly, turning my back on her and walking toward the front door. You just paid for the packaging. Goodbye. Diana. Diana, get back here, she shrieked, her high heels slipping in the mud. As she took a frantic step toward the porch. If you walk through that door, you will never see a dime of Westbrook money. You are dead to me. Do you hear me? Dead. I closed the wooden door behind me, shutting out her voice, shutting out her screaming, and shutting out the ghost of the life I had left behind. Inside the warm kitchen, Martha was standing by the stove, holding a fresh dish towel, her eyes wide with worry. Diana, sweetie, was that her? I walked over to Martha, wrapped my arms around her waist, and rested my head against her shoulder. She smelled of cinnamon, wood smoke, and real, unfathomable warmth. Above Martha's head, the number hovered at a steady, glowing 100. It's no one, Mom, I whispered. Just someone who used to live in my head. The D.C. National Convention Center was a massive cathedral of glass, polished concrete, and blinding white light. The Rhodes Sloan Academic Defense was a public event, attended by elite university recruiters, scientific journalists, and prominent philanthropists from across the globe. 10 high school finalists from across North America had been selected to present their original engineering theses before a panel of 7 world-renowned scientists and academics. I stood backstage, dressed in a sharp, dark charcoal suit that Martha and Frank had spent their entire monthly savings to buy for me at a department store in Charleston. It wasn't designer, but it was pristine, tailored, and worn with absolute pride. Beside me in the waiting area, standing among the opulent displays of prep school sponsors, was a group of familiar faces from Westchester. Through Catherine's extensive financial influence and emergency pull, she had somehow managed to wangle Bella an observer pass and a seat in the front row. Alongside a delegation from Oak Ridge Prep, including Headmaster Vance, Brittany, and Lauren. Catherine was determined to use the event to publicize Bella's supposed academic redemption, trying to rehabilitate their image in high society. When Catherine spotted me standing in the wings, her expression turned into a mask of icy contempt. She was seated next to Bella, who was wearing a red velvet Gucci dress that looked entirely absurd for a scientific symposium. Bella looked anxious, her hands fidgeting nervously as she glanced around at the massive audience of professors and scientists. Sitting a few rows behind them were Frank and Martha Greer. Frank was wearing his only suit, a 30-year-old black jacket that was slightly tight around his broad shoulders, and Martha was clutching her handbag with white knuckles, her eyes fixed on me with unbearable pride. Finalist number 4, Diana Greer, the announcer's voice boomed across the auditorium speakers. Representing Coal Creek High School, West Virginia. Whispers rippled through the delegation from Oak Ridge Prep. Greer? Not Westbrook. I had officially changed my legal surname 3 days prior. I stepped out onto the stage. The blinding spotlights washed over me, but I felt no nervousness. I didn't see the crowd, the reporters, or Catherine's glare. I only saw the massive digital presentation screen behind me, displaying the title of my thesis. A novel application of coal ash-derived carbon nanotubes in high-pressure structural alloys. I walked up to the lectern, clicked my remote, and began to speak. For 20 minutes, my voice echoed through the vast auditorium, clear, precise, and resonant with absolute authority. I didn't read from a script. I didn't hesitate. I explained how the discarded, toxic coal ash from neglected Appalachian mining sites could be chemically processed and synthesized into high-density carbon nanotubes, creating a lightweight composite alloy 3 times stronger than structural steel at a fraction of the cost. I presented the empirical data I had gathered with my own hands in Mr. Henderson's garage, backed by mathematical proofs I had calculated over freezing nights in the Greer kitchen. When I finished my final slide, the entire hall fell into a stunned, absolute silence. The head of the judging panel, Dr. Arthur Pendleton, a Nobel laureate in materials chemistry from Oxford University, leaned forward into his microphone. His thick silver eyebrows raised in profound fascination. Miss Greer, Dr. Pendleton said, his voice echoing across the hall. This empirical dataset, the thermal stress analysis on page 24. You conducted these pressure yield tests yourself? Without an industrial autoclave? I constructed a pressurized hydraulic testing rig using a modified 1998 diesel tractor engine and a high-yield thermal torch, sir, I answered calmly. The margin of error was kept within 0.02% by compensating for ambient atmospheric pressure variations in the Appalachian Valley. A low murmur swept through the panel of judges. Dr. Pendleton threw his head back and laughed, a booming sound of pure delight. Ingenious. Absolute. Engineering brilliance. From the front row, Catherine's face turned ghastly white. Suddenly, Bella stood up from her chair. Whether it was a manic episode born from jealousy, a desperate attempt to gain Catherine's approval, or sheer panic, Bella stepped into the aisle, her voice shrill and trembling as she shouted toward the stage. She's lying. The auditorium erupted into shocked gasps. Security guards shifted at the doors. Dr. Pendleton frowned deeply, looking down from the elevated panel. Excuse me? Who is speaking? She plagiarized it. Bella cried out, her face flushed red, tears streaming down her makeup as she pointed a manicured finger at me. She stole those notes from my family's house. She lived in our house for 18 years. That research belongs to the Westbrook family. She's a fraud. Catherine grabbed Bella's arm, trying frantically to pull her back down, her face twisted in utter horror. Bella, sit down. Shut up. Catherine hissed, but it was too late. The cameras were already swiveling toward them. I stood on the stage, looking down at Bella with quiet, unshakable pity. Bella, I said into the microphone, my voice echoing smoothly over her hysterics. If that research is yours, perhaps you can explain to the panel the thermodynamic conversion efficiency of coal ash silicates under a 3000-degree plasma arc? Bella froze. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked around frantically, her eyes darting from the judges to the staring audience. Or perhaps, I continued softly, you can explain the second law of thermodynamics as it applies to stress-strain hysteresis loops in anisotropic composites? Bella's chest heaved. The silence in the room was suffocating. She looked at Catherine for help, but Catherine had already pulled her hand back, covering her face in absolute shame, utterly refusing to meet Bella's eyes. Bella burst into loud, hysterical wails, turned on her heel, and ran out of the auditorium, her red Gucci dress trailing behind her like a ridiculous red flag. Headmaster Vance closed his eyes in disgust. Lauren stared at the floor, her shoulders shaking with quiet guilt. And Catherine sat frozen, exposed to the entire scientific and academic community as a foolish, vengeful woman who had brought a hysterical intruder to ruin a national event. Dar. Pendleton cleared his throat, entirely ignoring the spectacle, and looked back up at me with a warm, approving smile. Miss Greer, Dr. Pendleton said softly. On behalf of the Rhodes Sloan Foundation and Oxford University, extraordinary work. Simply extraordinary. The hall erupted into thunderous applause. I won the fellowship. The announcement was made an hour later. A 4-year full scholarship to Oxford University, an immediate undergraduate research fellowship at the Clarendon Laboratory, and $50,000 in direct research funding. When I stepped off the stage into the main lobby, I was immediately surrounded by reporters, university representatives, and congratulatory scholars. As the crowd slowly dispersed, I saw Catherine standing by the marble pillars near the exit. She was alone. Bella had locked herself in a taxi outside, and the Oak Ridge Prep delegation had already left in disgust, anxious to distance themselves from the scandal. Catherine stepped toward me, her posture broken, her eyes hollow. For the first time in her life, she looked her age. The pristine, untouchable Queen of Westchester was gone. In her place was a bitter, isolated woman whose status had been thoroughly shattered. She looked at me, then looked over my shoulder at Frank and Martha, who were standing nearby, waiting for me with glowing, tear-filled eyes. Catherine took a ragged breath. Diana. She whispered, her voice cracking. Are you really never coming back? I looked at the space above her head. There were no numbers. No red percentages, no flickering green digits, no digital stock tickers. My sight, the strange, terrifying gift that had ruled my childhood, had vanished entirely. I realized then why the numbers were gone. The system had never been a magic superpower. It had been a manifestation of my own childhood trauma, a psychological coping mechanism created by a terrified, neglected little girl who was desperate to measure whether she was safe, whether she was worthy, and whether the adults in her life were going to discard her. I didn't need to see numbers anymore. Because I no longer needed anyone's love to validate my existence. I'm already home, Catherine, I said softly. She stared at me for a long, silent moment. Then, realizing that there was no drama left to exploit, no guilt left to weaponize, and no girl left to control, she slowly turned and walked out through the heavy glass doors into the cold Washington rain, disappearing into the dark back seat of her empty car. 6 months later. The early morning mist was rising off the River Charwell, blanketing the ancient stone spires of Oxford in a soft, ethereal golden light. I walked across the historic quadrangle of Oxford University, wearing my black academic gown, a stack of research papers tucked securely under my arm. The air was crisp, smelling of old parchment, damp stone, and spring blossoms. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and smiled. It was a photo from West Virginia. Frank had used a portion of the research grant money I had sent home to open his own independent auto repair shop, Greer and Daughter Mechanics. In the photo, he was standing proudly under the new metal sign, wearing a clean blue jumpsuit, grinning from ear to ear. Beside him was Martha, holding a basket of fresh vegetables from her garden. Below the photo was a text message from Martha, thinking of you, our smart girl. Don't forget to wear a coat, the English wind is cold. We love you so much. I held the phone against my chest, feeling the deep, steady warmth radiating through my soul. I looked up at the towering Gothic archways of the university, listening to the soft, rhythmic chime of Big Tom ringing across the city. In Westchester, I had learned that conditional love was a cage, a fragile, flickering illusion built on expectations, vanity, and control. It was a number that could drop to 0 in the blink of an eye. But here, standing on the precipice of my own future, built by my own hands and supported by people who loved me simply because I existed, I knew the ultimate truth. Real love isn't a percentage. It isn't a score. It isn't something you earn, steal, or prove. Real love is the rock that remains when everything else burns away. And for the first time in my life, I was finally, unconditionally free.